Okay, Callum, Callum
Hello.
Morrison. I'm gonna say Callum Morrison because that's your name. Hello.
Hello, mate. How are you?
I'm good. Good to see you.
Opposite ends of the country. You down in Cornwall and me up here in the Highlands.
Yeah, I know, right? And I've done that journey a couple of times or
Mm,
so, and I've driven it, I've flown it, um, I've trained
walked
it.
it.
Well, no, I
Yeah.
haven't walked it yet. We always see the people going to Land's End from John O'Groats.
Yes.
Is that the right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
that
Yeah,
way.
Lance and John Grids, they'll come down. Not so,
Yeah,
not where I am, but I have seen them, yeah, on the road, on the A9, heading down, on
yeah,
bikes, bath chairs, walking backwards, doing
yeah.
whatever,
I
in
guarantee.
a bath full of baked beans or something, that whatever it is that they're doing.
Yeah, I guarantee I've seen every single person that you've seen up there. I've probably seen it down this end.
Yeah, no, indeed. Yeah.
And I normally, when I drive around them, go past them, I slow down. I'm like, "You're nearly there, mate. You're nearly there."
Yeah. But not if they're starting from you.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez. But anyway, look, it's really good to have you on. I'm really super hyped to have you on. I'm really looking forward to getting into it with you. Um,
Thank you. Lovely to
so
be here.
Thank you. So look, I feel like best way to start is for me to what the way I see you is you're someone that I've got anyone that knows me knows that I've got a few collaborators and people that I really lean into and work alongside. But I feel like out of everyone, and this is a bit controversial, but I get the most out of working collaborating with you, 100%.
Oh, thank you.
It's something completely in line with where I'm at and what I want to do with how I do it. Because you're so for anyone that is listening that might find this and they're probably wondering, well, what does Callum do? Obviously, it'll be in the description, but in your own words, current day, what is it you're doing?
Yeah, so essentially, we create experiences for individuals. We guide them to the edges of themselves,
Hmm.
elevating the human condition, creating stories for living, and we do that through a kind of blended mix of therapeutic modalities, developmental modalities, and within an experiential framework. So, this mix of psychotherapy, coaching, mentoring within within a within an experience that embeds then that learning, uh, facilitates the learning, embeds the learning, allows for the physical representation of metaphors in terms of the way that people are living their lives.
Hmm.
So yeah, we create these programs specific to them, and their requirements and their needs, and this takes them all over the world. Generally, with that,
Mm.
and so we use, as I say, experiences, but part of that is getting out and into unfamiliar environments, dislocating them in order to, disconnecting in order to reconnect with oneself. So yeah, that's essentially what we do,
Yeah.
and kind of pioneers in this particular space.
Pioneers. So when you use the word pioneers, I like that word. I love the word you use, dislocating as well. Didn't really hear. I've never really heard that terminology before I met you in
Oh,
this
what
con in this context.
what dislocating? You mean?
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah, we call it positive agitation.
Mm,
This kind of disruption you need to, which supports in opening people up and creating a degree of, yeah, awareness of the issues that they have. And we do that by working in unfamiliar places, taking watches and phones off individuals, disconnecting in order to reconnect with yourself, removing yourself from a framework that holds you in a particular place, and then so into an environment that there is no phone signal, that's relatively remote. It's like intentional theatre, essentially, what we do, and part of that is, obviously, intentional theatre to create an outcome with an intent. But that agitation is key because it opens people up, and within a short space of time, and often you only have people for a short space of time, it gets you further in terms of where you want to go with them on this journey that they're on.
Yeah.
My organization is called the Extraordinary Adventure Club, and I called it that because I believe the most extraordinary adventure is the exploration of oneself, seeing that
Hmm.
as a noble pursuit, and finding the edges of oneself and stretching it, thereby shaping change. And
Mm.
too often, we're frightened to do that. So creating this curated environment that allows for that dislocation, opening up and moving and change of tempo, and people never know where they're going or what they're going to do either. So those that come and work with us, have your phone and watch removed. We let us worry about the time and the program. You just focus on whatever it is that you're doing, and we don't tell them the content of the program either, because let go of this illusion of control.
Yeah.
But also it allows, as I say, for this degree of sort of dislocation and
Hmm.
um, agitation that then helps with us working with them. We
Yeah.
get faster to where we want to go. It's essentially it's a catalyst.
Yeah. 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 And as you just walked us all through that, I'm reflecting on when I first met you in person, because I kind of knew of your work, had known of your work and of yourself and who you are and what you do with the Extraordinary Adventure Club for quite some time. I just kept, your name kept popping up, your organization kept coming up, your work, I kept hearing about it. And then eventually, you know, we we connected, and I remember my dislocation, because of course, for me to collaborate with people like yourself and to know truly what you do, I have to be dislocated.
Yes,
And I remember we met. I think you picked me up. You did. You picked me up. You and Adam, when he was still on board with you guys, and you picked me up from the airport,
that's right.
and I was
I was trying to
wearing.
think where that was. Yeah,
Yeah, and I
yeah.
remember at the time I was wearing, like, my biker leather jacket, all of this clobber jewelry. I had
This
all.
is up in Inverness, isn't it? You
Yeah,
flew up to
yeah.
Inverness.
Yeah, and I had all my gear on. And basically it was like, right, out your civilian clothes. Drive me to drove me to a point where I really didn't know. Like you say, you don't tell people what's going on. You don't tell people anything. It's complete and utter, like, ultimate um mystery, I guess, and it's left to your imagination, and you don't know what you're expecting. And it was just like, I was hooked from that experience completely, and I just love collaborating with you guys, because it's just incredible what you do. For me, it was hiking into the wilds without even knowing where I'm hiking to, and spending a night somewhere I don't even know where I'm staying, because it was getting dusk when we started the hike. And we're in the middle of the Scottish Highlands, pretty much, aren't we?
Yeah,
Out that
yeah.
way, or out that way anyway. And it ended up, it was quite a it was just excellent. It was an extraordinary adventure, I can tell you.
Well, thank you.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I
I
mean,
loved it.
yeah, no, thank you. And I'd forgotten about that first meeting when we were speaking earlier, just before
Mm,
we started recording, and I couldn't recall how we had first met and whether it was in London. But you're right. It was when you'd come up to Scotland. You flew into Inverness. We picked you up, and I think we went over to the west coast from
yeah.
Inverness and hiked out and then stayed out, and obviously in areas where there's no phone signal. And we do it not to be obtuse either, but I think there's also a playful anticipation of not
Mm,
knowing. There's an excitement, fear and excitement, the two sides of the same coin.
hmm.
And there's a degree of, yes, the fear of the unknown, but also the excitement of that too.
Hmm.
And how powerful that can be in allowing you to explore yourself and sort of leading you. And how often do we have those experiences now, where so
Mm,
many things are so carefully controlled or curated in over curated in a particular way, and so little is raw and free flowing. So you try and have as much flexibility as possible, and even in those
hmm.
short moments, of a couple of days, just allowing things to happen. You don't know what the weather's going to be like, or the river levels are going to be like when you get there, or whatever it might be if you're in the outdoors. So being flexible, and I think that's a significant component of what we do, is being comfortable with the uncomfortable or with uncertainty, and being able to flex within it in the programs and keep
Yeah.
people at the edges of themselves. And not so much in your case, though. I think I recall that with you, it was like the worst. year for midges. Is that right?
It
Was that
was
with you?
it,
It was
it was
horrendous,
horrendous.
wasn't it?
It was
Absolutely
horrendous. Yeah.
horrible.
I didn't sleep. I didn't sleep the whole
No,
night.
I remember that. I didn't sleep much either, but it was just one of the worst. Yeah, I've never experienced midges like that. Where I think we stayed in a bothy, and the midges are literally
Yeah.
2 or 3 feet thick at the door, waiting for you to go in. So they were all over you as you walked in and out, and
Yeah.
you're breathing them in, and
Yeah. And there was a lot of people
horrible.
staying there.
There
People
was,
had
yeah.
crashed the party. There's about 30 people in there in total in a
Yeah,
small
there's a
bothy.
group of mountain bikers that had come through, and they were all, yeah,
So
they were all staying there.
every time everyone's going out to have a pee, the mozzies are coming in, the midges are
Yeah,
coming in, you know, it's just like
yeah,
nuts.
no,
But it was just
it,
that was part of the experience for me. That was what, we're talking about it now. That landed with me. It really resonated, every part of it. And then, the wild swimming in the rivers and that, the next day and stuff. It was just so beautiful and being out in that wild, you know, wilderness. I loved it.
yeah, and it's that connection to nature. I think we've to an extent lost that, or being comfortable with that. I think nature's too much sort of at an arm's length and abstract, and we don't know necessarily how to engage with it. There's a degree of fear around that, and
Hmm.
and so for us, bringing people into that kind of environment. Reducing that fear, them getting comfortable, them reconnecting, is where we're from, and you can't help but sort of settle into the rhythms of being in the outdoors and become quite attuned to, and over a period of days, become very much part of that, because we are part
Mm.
of it. We've stepped outside that, but we are very much part of it. And as I say, we forget that, and your sense of smell begins to heighten. You're able to withstand, your metabolism changes slightly. You're able to withstand the cold in a way. You're able to then swim in the river every morning, even though it's only, you know,
Mm.
2.5 or 4 degrees or whatever. And so things start to change physically, and then start to change internally too, and emotionally, and intellectually, and developmentally, which is obviously the point of the work that we do. Um, Things start to change too, and yeah, you can't. And spending time on your own and being there in silence or in stillness, or like at this time of the year where I live now, I mean, you go outside and it's an absolute, it's a rock concert of birdsong. It's so loud that
Mm.
it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah.
uh, There'll be 25 different types of birds all singing at the same time. So yeah, but there's an element of being in the outdoors, where being on your own, and raising this level of awareness. And I think too often we walk with this reductive gaze in our lives, and we don't open ourselves up. And again, you can't help but do that in those environments, and that then the external is reflected in the
Yeah.
internal.
Why, can I ask you, why do you said reductive gaze, and I like that term. I've never heard that before. You come out with all these narratives that I really like. They're really sort of outside the box. Why do you think, I think I know why, but why do you think we have that now? Or not everyone, but a lot of people.
I think perhaps twofold. I think one is around technology. Obviously, we're at our
Hmm.
phones. You have to go. All you have to do is go to a train station, or any public place. But train stations, tube, airport, and people are on their phones. Very
Mm.
few are up and looking around and
Yeah.
looking up and out.
Mm.
Far too many are focused in, so you don't see what's going on around you. You miss things. Your awareness isn't raised. You're not hearing stuff. You're very much drawn into and focused on what's happening on your screen, and you miss things that are going on around you.
Mm.
And I think, again, without making sort of lazy metaphors, but you're missing things that are going on internally too, or masking them because you're just so focused on that
Yeah.
particular thing. And I think societally too, that there's a focus right now on personality over character. Personality being essentially sort of pumped up personality that's relative, it's ephemeral and brittle, rather than the depth of a shaped, grounded character. So we have those two things that are in unison, end up with this sort of drive to a multiple uniqueness, rather
Yeah.
than, and so it then becomes very much about self and me as an individual. So the focus is always on an inward rather than on an outward view. And then but you can change that. You take people's phones off them, put them out into nature, and get out into an environment doing something, having an activity that's
Hmm.
displacing what they would have been doing. That then raises a degree of awareness, and you can bring that then within yourself too.
Yeah. So um, I've got a note here, which when I first approached you to join me in this conversation, I made a note, and it was about finding identity. And I've got a little side note that says, "Who am I?" question mark, right? Because I feel like um, when I rewind to my former life before I lived my life in a way where I, listened to the the chorus of the birds singing, and all of that stuff. I'm very connected. Feel like it's kind of like a reconnection, to
Mm-hmm.
what's already there. For me, I just sort of disconnected from it and lost my way a little bit, and got sidetracked. And when I reconnected, um, self-discovery, that curiosity, that you know, who am I? Who am I? And and what is my identity? Who am I? Is the simple question. And I really didn't know who I was. I was completely lost. I completely disconnected from my authenticity. So I see that what you do with the Extraordinary Adventure Club and as a human being, I see you as someone that encourages. I don't know if it's accelerate. I don't know if it's an acceleration of a reconnection. You give people, you create an environment. It's almost like you pull them out of their environment, put them into a new one, that dislocation, so that you can hold them in a safe space, but then they can explore that who am I?
Mm-hmm.
That's the way I see it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you create a framework and create an environment. This framing is isomorphic framing. This theater, that's part of it. You create a vessel for them to be able to explore themselves, to answer some of those fundamental questions
Mm,
that provide the fundamental building blocks for
mm,
one's life. Not knowing who you are or what motivates you, what your values are, what your drivers are, it's quite difficult then to live your life in any kind of meaningful or aligned way.
mm,
So yeah, I mean, for us, it's about creating that safe space. We deal in trust and vulnerability, and so creating an environment for people then that they can feel happy, that they're happy to
yeah.
open up, willing to encourage and engaged. It's a very egalitarian approach that we have on these engagements. That when we're working with one individual, there can be up to 4 or 5 of us, but it very much feels like a kind of family in
Mm,
in that setting. We're a group and we're in it together. So allowing and giving permission essentially for people to be able to open up, but yeah, you have to create then the framework that allows for that to happen, and that means removing certain things that then create this sort of agitation and vulnerability that allows for them then to explore with tools and the skills to be able to do that. The more they do it, the easier it gets. You build this kind of confidence in the change when
yeah.
you start doing more of that. And yeah, so for me, it is very much about, in fact, the who am I? Maybe that came from when you wrote that down and we spoke. That would be the first question that we would ask people, and it's a very
Mm,
simple question, but for most very difficult to answer,
mm,
and because so much is wrapped up in that. But yeah, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose and function in life? What am I frightened of?
mm,
Um, uh, uh, what's the story that we talk a lot about stories? What's the story that I tell myself about?
mm,
What's this internal narrative? What's the disconnect between the story that I tell myself and the reality of the life that I'm living? How do I create a new narrative arc? But then knowing where that is, and so for me, I liken it to a compass bearing. Who are you is like a compass bearing. I mean, I
mhm,
grew up climbing and spent a lot of time in the outdoors over the years, and for me, it's like this compass bearing, that compass bearing your being your values, this fundamental, visceral, non-negotiables
mm,
that you need to have in your life to make your life what it is. Those
mm,
key motivations and drivers that you have that are, as I say, it's non-negotiable. If I took one of them away, you'd feel it viscerally.
yeah,
And so that becomes then your compass bearing, and that becomes a kind of the who am I
mm,
in your path that you're walking through life, in
mm,
this narrative that you're following and exploring. And if you're a few degrees off that, you end up a long way from where you want to be over time. It says, for how
mm.
do you bring yourself back on to
I
that
love that.
bearing? So we
Yeah.
use that a lot, and you can demonstrate that when you're out. If you've got a compass out and you're showing it to one mountain and then a few degrees to another mountain, you can see that if you walk 10 kilometers, you're on two completely different hills with a massive valley in between. And
Yeah.
life can be like that too.
Yeah.
And it's about, you use the word curiosity. I think there's about instilling a curiosity around oneself and not seeing it as some sort of self-indulgent, navel gazing, sitting on a hill, at the expense of everything else, but actually, this exploration
Mm,
of oneself, being an adventurer with yourself and
mm,
who you are and what that means, and this kind of joy that you can have with that, and this real journey and yeah, this adventure that you can have whilst undertaking that. You don't need to go and climb mountains on the other side of the world to have an adventure. You can have it
mm,
in your own backyard, and you can have it with
mm.
yourself if you're
Yeah.
open to. And any of the great climbers and explorers that are adventurers. There's one guy, Walter Bonatti, very famous, well-known Italian climber. He talked about, look, I don't. Obviously, the concept of conquering mountains is a ridiculous notion, but he said, look, I don't climb mountains to conquer the mountain, or I don't climb to conquer the mountain. I climb to conquer myself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
about that. So that's just then the vehicle
Hmm.
for that. So that's this exploration that one can have, and as I say, seeing it as a noble pursuit and a fundamental um, component of living a purposeful life, and a life aligned with who you are, and a life that's more fulfilling, and development of one's potential, and happiness too. And we've all had that in these moments where you've got this kind of disconnect,
Hmm.
between the as I say, the story that you tell yourself, which is often wrong, and the reality of the
Gotcha.
life that you're living, and how you bring those two together.
Yeah.
Um, and Yeah, and it's not, for many, it's not very far away. I mean, we've had people where we've brought them up to Highlands, a bit like where you came to us, and that was in the Cairngorms, in a beautiful valley in the
Mm.
Cairngorms that we went into. But there's a spot up there underneath a Scots pine tree that's a couple of 100 years old at least, probably more like 300, at the head of a valley, looking down right beside the river. And beautiful, wonderful, no phone signal, just
Mm.
in wild. And the reason for doing that again is this kind of dislocation. But I've taken people there with an intention to leave on their own, sit with a question or an intention,
Yeah.
uh, and they're in tears. They're absolutely terrified of being left on their own with themselves, with their thoughts, perhaps for the first time, because we just don't do enough of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And being, because you did a similar thing to me where you took me somewhere. I don't think it was that spot, but it was somewhere in a valley, and you left me on my own. Now, if you'd left me on my own 30, 20 years ago or whatever,
Yeah. Yes.
I would have probably been sucking my thumb and, maybe, I don't know. I don't know. I would have felt very sort of, I don't know how I would have felt actually. But when you did it, when I did that engagement, it was just like, I embraced it because I've been doing that myself. So I
Mm.
think there is an absolute difference between embodying this ability to just be with yourself, in any situation. And what a beautiful setting to be able to learn and do that. And you don't just leave people
No.
and then go off and say,
No.
figure it out, find a fire.
No.
I'm
See
sure
you
you'll,
later.
yeah, it's all done in a very methodical way. I was going to ask you, for anyone listening, you mentioned climbing in your younger years. You grew up, I presume you grew up. I think you've spoke to me about this before, about you've grown up climbing. You was always in the
Hmm.
mountains. But you know, your qualification for this sort of work, you know, how does one go and get a qualification? It's not like you just go and go to college and learn how to be a, you know, a survivalist or a,
No, no, I suppose. Yeah, and I mean, I see myself very much as, particularly when working, and you know, you've been involved in some of our programs too in terms of delivery. I
yeah,
see
yeah,
myself
yeah,
very much as the choreographer rather than the principal dancer.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
not the
totally.
principal dancer. I've got, you know, people within the team that are, or within the group that we put together. So we select a team specific to the individual, you know, and within that, we'll be a, you know, hugely qualified and experienced psychotherapist or psychiatrist or counselor or whatever, a particular
Hmm.
um, change work specialist, whatever that might be, or a coach, or
Hmm.
you know, an outdoor guide, you know, climbing
Yeah.
or dog sledding or whatever. I mean, because we run programs all over the world, so whatever that is, rather than me having those specific
Yes.
full
Yeah.
suite of qualifications, and for me, it's more been about building uh, uh, a skill set based on experience from, yeah, as I say, growing up. I mean, I'm half Norwegian, half Scottish, and Norwegians have this sort of friluftsliv, you know, outdoor life mentality and
Hmm.
mantra. So going from a very young age, just being in the outdoors and being outside and
Hmm.
being comfortable with that, and with that kind of, you know, uncertainty that being in the outdoors brings, because of particularly in Scotland, changeable weather, you know, 4 seasons in a day,
Mm.
and being comfortable with being wet and cold, even from a young age, you know, where you can go off do those things. And with my dad going out on kind of longish expeditions, it, albeit at a young age, you know, wearing cagoules that were way too long. I think there was like a the clothing. I used to think that You'll Grow Into It was a brand, because that's all my parents ever
Yeah.
fucking said to me was when you know, you got a pair of boots and you'll kind of grow into them, and for any of the clothing or the boots, they would only fit you for sort of 2 months when you didn't require them, and the rest of the time they were too big or too bloody small. You know,
Oh
so we'd be
no.
sort of tramping around following my dad, predominantly in and around the Perthshire Hills,
Yeah.
and then in Norway a bit, and then when we moved further north, up to north of Inverness. Yeah, just really embracing that then, and being
Yeah.
in the outdoors. And you know, it was, I mean, there it wasn't about trying to. I mean, I read about getting youngsters out of the house and away from the computer. There it was, and then it was how to get you back in again, because you'd have
Yeah.
disappeared off,
Yeah.
to
Can
make
get
sure that
you.
you were all right.
Yeah.
You
Can
know,
get you away from it. It's
couldn't
like,
get you away from it, because you would be off
yeah.
all day with your mates.
It's mad.
And I could, we lived on the East Coast, just about a mile from the sea, and I could walk out the back door through the forest off the back field, and then all the way to the west coast of Scotland without crossing a road until I got there. You know, you
Yeah.
could do that kind of, and having that space. And I remember when I was like 13 or 14, going out camping with a mate way up some glen. No phones or anything. You know, we were there for the week. And we just, one of the farmers, when he came to check on his sheep, just checked in to make sure that we were all right. And then that was it, you know. So it was something that I then grew up with and innately embraced. And you're developing resilience and skills, and you know, this kind of dealing with risk, you know, dynamic decision making that you're having to do when you're out, and getting
Yeah.
into climbing then. And then I was in a mountain rescue team when I was like 15, 16, and
Wow.
was with them and became a full member. And I, you know, I'm so grateful to those guys who are absolutely brilliant at taking
Mm.
us. There was a group of us, 6 of us, and training us up, and then taking us out. And then, you know, this kind of responsibility for others. You're holding ropes, you know, you're belaying, and
So you're learning, for what I'm getting from this is you're learning from a young age, because I'm doing a parallel here of where I was at that age, 14,
mm,
15, 16, and it was completely opposite to, you know, when I was last up with you and Henry was there and we were talking and I said to you guys, I so needed, I would have really, really embraced if I had it. what was on offer, what you're describing. I really needed that in my life, that sort of
Mm,
guidance and that sort of apprenticeship kind
mm.
of thing. That it sounds like it's almost like an apprenticeship,
Yes.
which a lot of people lack. That that sort of just that discipline from your elders and that mentorship that you're receiving.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. That is exactly what they they provided for us and guided us through. And these kind of
Mm,
older mountain men, who took these youngsters under their wing and
mm,
and literally taught them the ropes and
mm,
provided that um, secure environment for them. And it's like a rite of passage in many respects, in the sort of, these elders and youngsters, where you're going from this boyhood to manhood and girlhood to
definitely.
womanhood that we don't have in our society anymore. And so, people will self-initiate through kind of risky means to affect that in an unstructured way, whether it's drugs, fast cars, fighting, whatever it might be, hooning
Yeah,
around, because they don't have that, and they and
exactly.
and they do benefit from having
Yeah,
a rite of passage. I mean, it's still in other cultures, we still do have that, but for those guys, that's essentially what that was. And I've been lucky to have a couple of rites of passage
yeah,
with those individuals. And then when I joined the military, it was the same kind of thing. These older
mm,
individuals, hugely experienced, who would teach you and provide strong boundaries, but allow you then this kind of exploration of yourself in
yeah.
a structured way. And you would fall, or there would be, and you're climbing, you're falling, the length of your rope or whatever, from to the next piece of protection. But you're doing those sorts of things, and they're
Is that
allowing for that to happen.
yeah? Because am I right in saying you're Marine, Royal Marine? That was
Yes,
what
that's
yeah,
right.
you
Yeah,
landed
that
in that.
was
Okay.
yeah, that was a while later. After uni, and I traveling across Africa when I left uni, just sticking out my thumb and hitching from Morocco
Wow.
to South Africa, or hitching an independent travel. And then yeah, joined up. Was an officer in the Royal Marines for 8 years.
Hmm.
Um, and had absolutely no idea what that was going to be like, really. I mean, I passed the sort of selection processes, and had a guy who was really very kind of forward thinking, who was in one of the selection boards that put me through. And but I absolutely loved it. I mean, it was hard work, it was
You had a very good
challenging.
base. You had a very good baseline, like foundation to get into for it, though. Do you not
Yeah,
think?
I think yes, I did. I mean, certainly the outdoor elements of that, or living outside and in the
Mm.
field and navigating, and even though on my first ever patrol I got lost, but still, you know, uh, I still say that's not my fault. But you have to be responsible for for yourself and
Yeah,
your actions. Absolutely.
accountability,
Yeah,
accountability,
of
Callum.
course. Yeah. So um, yeah, I think in that respect, I was prepared for
Yeah.
it, and I'd been on a few expeditions, and I'd worked at Outward Bound and things during
Mm.
my student times. I've been off to South America and sort of living out, and with some ex-military or currently serving military people as part of an expedition. So I'd kind of got a taste of it, but I still had no idea. I mean, I was like some sort of long-haired, or relatively long-haired. I mean, I got no hair
Wait,
now, but
I need to see these photos, man. Where's the
yeah,
photos,
I've
Callum?
burnt
Come
them
on.
all.
Oh,
I burnt them
mate.
all. My sort of bandana and long hair, pair of shorts climbing in the south of France, sort of
Oh,
stuff.
mate. I've got to
Uh,
find photos.
yeah, but unprepared for what that would mean going into an organization like that, with its own language and its own culture, and completely.
Yeah.
I'd arrived from Zimbabwe sort of 3 weeks before training started, and I've got no family in the military apart from some Second World War and on the Norwegian side in the resistance. Um, but no kind of. So I had absolutely no, and it was hard, physically
Yeah.
very demanding, and but in a way, it's I call it a lazy person's personal development, because you're forced into finding out who I am. Who
Yeah.
am I? You find that out pretty quickly. You find out what your boundaries are. You find out that you can stretch them. You find out that your body will do whatever you ask it to. You just got to ask the right questions.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Your mind gives out before your body does. You might pay for it later,
Yeah.
and but actually at that time, this kind of exploration of yourself, and you think, I can't go on, and then you do, and then you keep going and you keep
Yeah.
going. You
Yeah.
think, well,
Yeah.
where else can I do that?
Yeah.
And you're intellectually also engaged, because they just at the point where you think you're on top of things, they just add something else in. It's very cleverly done.
Yeah, so this is what you have certain elements. It's not like you're plucking people out of civilian life and putting them through hell in the way that you was taught, but you're using certain elements and in a methodical way. Like I remember you saying about your training in the Marines. It's correct me if I'm wrong. It's like you learn to build extreme resilience in the worst possible conditions. Is that correct? Is that fair to
Yes,
say?
yeah, you do. You learn to build resilience, and to so you have an understanding of who you are. You have an
Mm,
understanding of what motivates other people. So knowing who you are and where your kind of edges are, which you can stretch out slightly, but knowing kind of roughly where those are, then um, you can make better quality decisions about what you're going to do. You can also bring people in to support you. But yeah, you build
yeah.
this resilience and this confidence and this ability to be comfortable with the uncomfortable, to deal with uncertainty, to embrace that,
Mhm.
to maintain a degree of flexibility. Eisenhower said planning's essential, plans are worthless, because, and you recognize that, as soon as you've implemented a plan, it's changed. So the
Yeah.
old military adage of, what's changed, or and implementing those kind of
Hmm.
things, and that confidence from that period, that I can then take into other areas of my life, where you just have this confidence to,
Yeah.
okay, deal with the uncertainty, whatever happens, and iterate in
Absolutely.
that moment. So yeah, I think the resilience around this elasticity to bounce back, so physically, your physical
Mm.
capability, but also emotionally and intellectually to be able to also bounce back
Yeah. Yeah.
and reset yourself and go again,
Yeah.
and yeah, have this awareness, and it's a group. We're there. It's like a pack. It's a this pack mentality, this tribe. You're all looking after each other. So you'll
Mm.
see you have this raised awareness. I think
Yeah.
that was the other thing about the military that I found, about the training that I found, um, extraordinary. Now that I reflect on it, is this raised awareness that you have in situations that they develop within you, um, and to see what's going on, to hear what's going on, to be aware of individuals, so that you're very much more in tune with your environment. So you spot things when they're looking out of place. There's a reason,
Yeah.
obviously, for doing that, but it helps in all other areas of your life, and particularly bringing maybe that through to the work that I do now, and we
Yeah.
do now, is this kind of raised awareness of what's going on, what people are saying, how they're responding, how they're reacting, what in that moment can we do to keep them at the edges of themselves, to
Yeah.
support in their development.
Yeah.
So that
I've
comes from that.
Yeah, I've bared witness to what you've just described. In collaboration when I've been part of that pack, with you, on engagements when you've been the what did you call it? The choreographer,
Yeah,
choreographer.
yeah, I'm the
Yeah,
choreographer, not the principal
choreographer.
dancer.
Yeah,
You're the
yeah,
principal dancer.
yeah. I am, and but I've bared witness to that. I have. I've bared witness to exactly what you just described. There's a lot of because it's not like I think. My opinion, the way I see things is we're living in a very sort of like we can live in a very self-absorbed existence in modern life because it's sort of mapped out where, I mean, I know I was doing it, I was very self-centered and I didn't have that self-awareness, let alone awareness outside of that. And I feel like to discover who I am, to have that self-awareness and that self-development, naturally you start to see outside of that and you have more of a broader awareness of what the world around you. That's been my personal experience. And engaging with you guys, and whenever I've done it, there's absolutely that going on. I've seen it, how everyone is interacting and always observing and seeing, working with the person on the engagement. What is it? Where are they at right now? And what is it they need,
Mm.
in any given moment? And it's very fluid. Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Because that's life.
Yes.
Life is fluid.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I mean, what makes us as humans, this kind of emotional, it's emotions and uncertainty. and unpredictability, so you have to be fluid, and
Yeah.
there has to be an element of yeah, iterating in the moment and allowing things to play out, and yeah, again, sort of not holding rigidly to any kind of structure. And I think
Mm.
people are surprised when we talk about some of the overseas engagements that we do, where we head off into the jungle in Ecuador or deserts of Sudan, or Mongolia, or wherever it might be, with clients, thinking that there's a whole sort of day by day, hour by hour structured process, but there
Mm.
isn't. It's essentially, okay, we know where we're going to arrive, what we're going, when we're going to leave. We know who we've got. There's a framework around that, but it's entirely then
Yeah.
fluid and unpredictable in terms of what's going to happen within that framework, because you don't know how people are going to react, and you don't know, and that's
Yeah.
internally within the team, internally
Mm.
within oneself, but also externally. All sorts of things can happen, that whether it's weather, whether it's
Mm.
the military of the country that you're in deciding to do a live firing exercise in the area that you're in, without, because they've just not told anybody. That's um, and then how you react and adapt to that. So I think, if anything, as well as the awareness, it's the ability to deal with uncertainty that the time
Mm.
training, and then time in the Marines, and some of the things that I've done thereafter, excuse me, that have allowed me to
Mm.
then feel comfortable in that kind of uncertainty, and sometimes relatively chaotic environment, and being able to
Yeah.
control a small part of that, and that's more than other people are doing, and that's more than enough.
Yeah, yeah. I think a lot of people might listen to what you've just said and God, and thought, God, that sounds really scary, or oh my God, that's like I can't even imagine, getting out of my comfort zone. But that's where the growth is.
Yeah,
It's where the growth is for me anyway. You have to.
yeah.
You got to get out your comfort zone.
Well, yeah, I think people live so closely within themselves and hold so tightly to those things that they know, without recognizing the full potential that they have,
Mm.
and the full capability that they have, and recognizing that they're capable of much more. And
Mm.
that's certainly with the things that we do. If you can do this, if you can trek across the desert in Sudan, or you can
Mm.
paddle down a tributary of the Amazon, and surviving and sleeping in a particular way. And it's also structured, by the way, with coaching and engagement, and independent, also therapeutic engagement whilst we're doing it. But if you can do those things, and you're capable of that much more, where else can you bring that in your life? And so it's this
Yeah.
kind of, again, this iterative process of incremental gain for the individual. So, and they can then
Yeah.
take that, okay, knowing what you now know, what difference does that make, and how do I bring that into my life when I come back?
Yeah.
Because
I
you're,
love
you're
that.
you're fundamentally changed by those
Yeah.
experiences.
Yeah. That's been my experience in my life, definitely. I remember being on an engagement with a client, and it wasn't with you guys, it was just something else. And I was put in a situation which I believe I shouldn't have been in because I wasn't an expert. I was in a very high mountain range, or what I considered, and I was still
Oh, I
grappling
remember you
with a
telling
fear.
me.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
still grappling a
Mm.
fear of heights, and I flagged
Mm.
it. And I did say, look, I feel like we should have someone, if only you were there, or someone of your ilk, because I wasn't the guy. I'm the dancer who's just not. This isn't my dance. This one is not my dance.
Yes. I'm a tap dancer in a ballet right now.
Yes, absolutely. And anyway, coming away from that experience, it really unsettled me. Um, and because it brought up a lot of fear for me, being, I had a really heightened fear of heights at that point.
Mm.
But I decided what I did with that was I was like, well, I want to address that. I want to lean into it because I don't really want to be debilitated by that experience again. I wanted to sort of overcome it, overcome the fear. So I decided to go and do a skydive, jump out of a plane. That's how I dealt with it. I
Yes.
just thought, you know
Yes.
what? I'm
Yeah.
just gonna, I'm just gonna, I'm just gonna face my fear. And since doing that, you know, I've
How's that been? Have you been out
oh,
on a big hill? You went out the other one of the
I,
times you came up here, I think, didn't you? Didn't you go out?
yeah, yeah. Well, we weren't up that high, I don't think. But it's normally when there's like a bit of a sketchy edge or something, and
Yeah.
it's something a little bit precarious. And there's a little route down here. It's not high, but it's like a mountain goat pathway where you've got a bit of rope, and it's
Yeah.
if you fall, you fall. And normally I would have frozen and not gone down it, but I went down it and I went up it. So it's improved. I'm facing my fears in the height department. So that's me. When you're on these, do you how you come across that stuff like with clients? Obviously, you must come across that stuff.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and and I was going to say with you, the more you do it, the easier it gets. So it's
Mm,
like you're building a memory, and again, you're stretching out just incrementally, just stretching out your capability, and you get confidence then each time. So the scope
yeah.
track for you, you can then go, having done that up and down, you can then maybe do something that's a bit longer or it's a little bit steeper, and you just gradually just pushing it out each time,
Mm,
and you can do more and more and more and more. So what you thought initially that you weren't capable of doing, you're now capable of doing much more, just because you started to do that particular thing, and
yeah.
putting you in an environment and supporting you. So with us, with clients, supporting you and going through that particular process. So doing things that you never thought possible. And often people will do something and only after the event realize what they've done, when you then talk about it and you use that as a
Yeah.
point of discussion or
Yeah. Yeah.
inquiry or
Yeah.
celebration or whatever it might be, that actually, do you know that this is what you've done? And they think,
Yeah.
wow, I didn't even realize, because I was so
Yeah.
into doing it.
Yeah.
So yeah, supporting people in that, and not, because what you want to do is, or what we try to do is, keep people at the edges of themselves. So this is
Hmm.
my job as like the choreographer, is to keep people at the edges of themselves, but not to push through. Because if you push through, people then shut down, they become frightened or
Yeah.
overwhelmed or whatever it might be, that then stops in this process of learning, and it doesn't become enjoyable. It's got to be fun too. I mean, I don't want it to sound like it's super heavy and we're, taking people out and it's just a continual kind of grind for them. It's actually a lot of fun, and making it fun too. So that's got to be part of it, because that helps to pull you through. It's got to be an
Yeah.
interest for
Yeah.
them, and there's got to be, because they never know where they're going, but we'll incorporate an interest. So there's got to be an interest for them, and it's got
Yeah.
to be fun. So
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
so we do have those things that then happen with clients, and also, not it's not only that, it's with ourselves too. We're often doing things sometimes for the first time too, and think, fucking hell, how am I going to,
How am I
you
going to
know
get around this one?
how am I going to get around this? I wasn't entirely
Yeah.
sure that, or actually, this is a situation that I haven't been present, but backing yourself to be able to do it, you've got the experience around you as
Yeah.
well. But yeah, being put in situations which,
Yeah.
I talk about choreography, which is probably the worst analogy I can use, because I don't mind dancing, but I mean, my idea of my sort of a nightmare that would wake me up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat is having to dance on stage in front of a huge group of people to no music. So knowing that, I'm trying. I was just trying to think of examples when I've been stretched. We on one of the engagements, we stayed with a local family. It was in Sudan, and the person that we were working with knew that I didn't like dancing. This family had invited us in. We were sort of living with the family in a way that you normally wouldn't get a chance to do. But after the meal, they all are then standing up and dancing and singing,
Oh
and
no.
singing rather, and then dancing, and like dancing around this large dining room table with all the extended family around, like clapping. And then the person that we were working with is saying, "Oh, Calum loves dancing. He's really good.
Oh
You need to
no.
get him up. He's amazing." And I'm
Oh
looking at them just
no.
thinking, "Oh, shut up." But so I then had to dance round this table, no
Yeah.
music, whilst they're clapping, and it was just that's yeah, sort of stretching the
Oh
edges of my
yeah.
of and being in a difficult situation, because it's all different. Everyone's got their. It's not yours is height or was height.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
For me,
Totally.
it's that kind of thing. So everyone's got their a very different and
Yeah.
finding a different edge and finding what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know, yeah, and I think also it's the same for when we create these situations, perceived and actual risk. It's the same for the participant. So you create something where there's a degree of sort of
Mm,
jeopardy to elicit change, because hardship precedes transformation. There's got to be a degree of there's got to be some catalyst for
yeah. Yeah.
that to occur. It doesn't just happen on its own. I can't give you a pill. Here you go, Dave, take that. Or tell you what, just we'll just crack it in a couple of hours between breakfast and lunch. We'll just do the whole who am I thing and you're done. That
Job done,
there's
sorted.
a hack for it. I
Yeah,
think that's
yeah.
complete nonsense.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I mean, in retrospect, I look at my life's suffering, if you want to call it that. It wasn't all bad, but there's a lot of suffering. And look where I am now. I mean, I've got honestly, I'm so blessed. I feel so grateful of where I've got
Mm.
to and the life I have, and every ounce of hardship and struggle and the suffering and the challenges that I've faced got me to a point where I've faced it. I've had to face myself. Ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm facing myself
Yeah.
because I'm there all the way. I'm the one that's carrying me through these experiences. And I have a choice. Do I want to just deflect and deviate from going inward and looking at myself and seeing what's there and challenging myself and seeing how far I can push it? I think I did it in a lot of unhealthy ways. I think I'm not alone there. I believe that's for a lot of people, that's what we do. I feel like we face ourselves and challenge ourselves in all the wrong places
Yeah.
in life sometimes. I know I had done anyway. So my life now is how can I um, how can I grow? I'm always looking for new pockets of we use the word curious, curiosity. I want to be curious in life. I want to see what else can I do, what can I achieve, how far can I push it, but not to my detriment. And I think there's a fine line between to your detriment and others detriment, and it being for a positive outcome, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I believe that a lot of the engagements you um do you feel like everyone that you work with, what side of that coin are they on? Is there a difference? Can you tell? I mean, some people come to you that are really quite broken, and they're just lost, or are there people there that are kind of maybe what more like what I'm describing? They're already on a path, and they're just looking to get it to the next level, and they just want, do you know what I mean? They just want to
Hmm. Hmm.
have an experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that in a sec. I think also just picking up on your point there, earlier, is that any of these engagements or to um, this exploring oneself or having curiosity that you're following, it requires a degree of motivation. It requires endeavor too. So any of these things require endeavor
Yeah.
and require engagement, require effort. It doesn't happen on its own. It's not a passive thing. And I
Hmm.
think that too often, or there's a kind of lazy narrative or a narrative around the fact that it's just going to happen to you, or you don't have to do anything. You can sit there and ask for the universe to do stuff for you or to you, and it doesn't necessarily, requires endeavor. And I don't demean or belittle that. I'm just saying it requires endeavor for you to have these changes in it. And I think that's sometimes
Yeah,
the thing that's missing, that people aren't willing to put the effort in. And it can be
absolutely.
uncomfortable and it can be hard work, and it can be a point when you first went down that goat track, that would have been challenging, for you with a fear of heights to do that kind of thing, or when you jumped out of the plane with the parachute, so it requires this kind of endeavor. Again, it's not a passive thing, and certainly that's something that we find younger generations probably. I mean, we were with 18 plus generally,
Yeah,
um, but with younger generations, it's kind of passivity, or the fact that it's going to happen, or there's some kind of hack of some sort. And I mean, you just described
always. Yeah,
that
totally.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
um yeah, and then in answer to your question, I mean, there's the people that come to us are either those that are at an inflection point in their lives in some way. They are on a pathway, or they have an itch they can't scratch about who they are. They've
Mm.
maybe sold a business and made a significant amount of money, but still have, yeah, as I say, this itch they can't scratch, or this sort of lack of awareness, or an understanding of themselves and how they got to this particular place, and they want to find that out. They
Mm.
thought that by getting to that point, things would be revealed, but they haven't
Yeah.
necessarily. So that they want to do that, and that. Um, uh, or they've, relationship breakdown, divorce,
Mm.
maybe a crisis point too, and they're coming out of that, or are in it.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a whole host, or those who just want to improve performance, or those that, maybe an athlete that's finished doing their been a very high an athlete, a high level international sports person, and they're now, how do I transition into something else? Who am
Yeah.
I?
Yeah.
What are the things that motivate me and inspire me? What are the values that I have that's outside the sport that I'm playing? So those would be the one group, and then the other group would be those with an acute need or requirement, who are in treatment or are in recovery, and
Hmm.
looking to rebuild and create a new framework for their life going forward, and anchor to
Hmm.
habit, good behaviors, and I say good, in parenthesis, but positive behaviors and constructive behaviors,
Hmm.
and create experiences that then serve as markers along this particular journey. The
Hmm.
building confidence for them in this change, building skills and a competency around that, building a resilience and self-sufficiency, a
Yeah.
personal self-confidence, and an ability to endure. So those would be the sort of two people. And within that first group, I would also say, the kind of next generation of large enterprise families, which is a significant component of the work that we've done, in terms of having a sort of rite of passage or building a
Yeah.
degree of resilience that they're looking to step into, maybe a role within the family organization, or but don't feel that they're ready, or parents don't feel that they're ready,
Yeah.
and working with them to 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 explore that, to create this framework, to create the confidence and solidity in them as an individual
Mm.
that then allows them to take on those roles and to deal with issues as they arise.
Yeah.
So yeah, those would be the two types that we would work with.
Okay. When do you remember? I don't know if I've ever spoke to you about this. Do you remember the day that you just suddenly went, "Ah, I know what. There's something in this, and when you founded EAC, Extraordinary Adventure Club. Do you remember the day you did
Um,
it?
I remember I suppose there's two parts to that. One is when I was 19 and worked at Outward Bound, um, and I was like an assistant instructor, um, and we were running an expedition, and I was there specifically for this. It was like an expedition that was coming through the UK for people from outside the
Mm-hmm.
UK, outside Europe,
Mm-hmm.
and I remember a couple of the people that we had on that had been in trouble with the law, kind of young offenders, and they're all older than me, um, and we, as part of the process, we then did this kind of solo time, which Outward Bound was pioneering, well known for at that time, and I was probably a couple of weeks in the mountains in Scotland. We'd already been doing some stuff. Everybody's a bit tired and cold. We're into it quite a way now. So-called realities far away from them, and we had a discussion initially about the individuals and how they were performing, a group discussion, and then sent them out on their own for, I think it was 24 hours, under a tarpaulin, sleeping bag, notebook and pen. We don't give people notebook and pen when we're doing it, no distractions at all. But for them, notebook and pen, bottle of water, and then bring them back in after 24 hours. And they can't see anybody; they're just completely on their own as individuals. And
Yeah.
the transformation then in that time with some of these youngsters, sort of crying, uh, reflecting on their behavior, and upset with the way that they'd let down family and themselves
Mm.
and community, and and I thought, I remember at the time thinking, wow, this is amazing. I mean, this is the outcome for those who aren't necessarily, or don't necessarily go into that environment, doing the sort of things that I do for fun at weekends or
Yeah.
during the week, and I'd never really sort of seen the reflected power of that, because I'd always been too deep in it, of doing those things by
Yeah.
myself and
Yeah.
climbing and whatever. So that planted a seed for what I now do, and thinking, well, how can I do something that then incorporates all of these adventurous engage in certain activities that I love alongside supporting the development of individuals. But it wasn't until much later. I mean, I would have been in my 40s and I'd gone through, time in the Marines and working in various places like in hostile environments in Afghanistan and
Mm,
Libya and Iraq and wherever. Um, and essentially in those environments affecting mutually beneficial outcomes
mm,
in an environment. If you get it wrong, you get it properly wrong, and what motivates people and how do they, uh, how do you, identify this kind of pathway to success in those environments and doing that in such a way as to not get yourself further into any kind of difficulty. And then in business, and it was, yeah, as I say, in my 40s. And so the second part of that was when I'd left big business. I'd run a company. It was like 1,200 people. Didn't enjoy it at all, and couldn't wait to leave. I used to like walk into my office past all, the executive team, shut the door, sit down at my desk, put my head in my hands, and think, what the fuck am I doing? These people deserve better than this, and I'm so far removed from who I am. So I'd engineered leaving, came back to the UK, did a few of these kind of field liaison jobs in various parts of the world, and I was then out in Singapore following particularly sort of, it wasn't a particularly good business lead, but one where I was getting more and more, as I'm getting closer to what I'm now doing, this sort of death throes of this old world that I'd been in, and
yeah.
thinking that I could still do that, and I'm still part of this old story. And I remember this business meeting hadn't gone particularly well. I'd walked out of the hotel. I was walking over the overpass of the bridge, a pedestrian kind of overpass, and as I'm stepping out, I feel the very edge of myself like snagging on the bridge, like catching, my jumper on the railing. And as I'm
What?
walking, I look down and I can see myself sort of unraveling, like
No way.
like somebody's got the thread of, your granny's cable knitted jumper. And
Yes.
basically I can see it as I'm happening. Every step I'm taking, I'm just unraveling, and I barely get to the other side. And I literally remember I'm like on all fours almost at the other end of this bridge. And I came home and my wife looked at me and she said, look, whatever you have to do, you just go and do it. And so I then spent time up on, you've been here, up onto the beaches close where I am. It's like
Yeah, I
Six
love
Mile
it there.
beaches in
Oh
the,
my God, yeah.
I spent weeks there with a notepad and pen, kind of figuring out, you asked about the who am I?
Yeah.
Who am I? And I didn't know who to turn to or how to do it. I just sat with a sort of pen and pencil and notepad, and just for weeks literally would go up there each day and then work out, who am I? What is it that motivates me? What are the parameters that I currently have? What is the compass bearing that I'm walking on, which is the one that I do need to walk on? How do I switch myself onto that? How do I take the seed of an idea that I had when I was 19 and make it into something? How do I sketch that out, and to whom am I going to deliver that? And then that's where it started. And so I would have been, I mean, when was that? That was like 2010, 2011, basically, when I
Yeah, 50,
when I did
15
that.
years ago,
Yeah.
roughly. Wow. What you just took everyone through there, um, is a really good, you've kind of mapped out. If anyone is listening and thinking, who am I? Literally, if you are, this is why I'm doing these, this is why I'm really so grateful that you've joined in conversation, Callum, because this inspiration that I'm getting from it anyway, of the journey that you've been on, and to get to a point where in your, well, 15 years ago, you're at that point in your life, and I have a similar journey, different stories, but
Mm.
where, I got to a point in my life where I'm sort of asking the same question, and there's a lot of humility in that, a lot of humility. You've got to get past your pride, that ego, the inner voice chattering away, saying this and that. And, you know, it's really inspiring to me to hear people when they say, I got to a point where I'm asking myself the who am I? So anyone
Yeah.
that's listening, if you are at a point where you're like, well, I'm at that point, I strongly encourage you to to lean into it if you can. Dare to lean into it because you will not regret it. And if you're not sure how to do it, Callum's contact's definitely going to be in the link below in the description if you feel you need some assistance. But for you to get to that, am I right in saying this, Callum? You know, it's the humility of being just like, you know, because especially for us guys, you know, getting to a point where you're sort of, we're meant to have it all figured out by then.
Yeah. Well, most people don't. Most people are just making it up as they go along,
Totally.
basically. And with imposter syndrome, I mean, I meet people who are kind of at the top of their game, whether in business or the creative arts, whatever, who say, I'm going to get found out one day,
Yeah,
and somebody's going to
yeah,
say, hang on a minute, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about, and
yeah, yeah.
so I think there's an element of everybody doing that, and the imposter syndrome within all of us, or this uh, notion that you're going to get found out at some point.
Mm,
uh, yeah, and again, yeah, that you have it all figured out, whatever that figuring out is, in terms of, yes, an understanding of oneself. But again, it doesn't happen. It's like this. I think there's this societal trick or fallacy that but you reach a certain age or a certain level of wealth that it will all happen for you, and it'll just spread out, like you'll come out into this wonderful valley that you'll see,
mm,
you'll crest a peak and it'll all be there, and it isn't. And it
yeah,
just, you kind of have to keep going, and you'll have to keep going until you stop and take that journey inwards, and that's the difficult step, and we can all do it. To your point, yeah, everybody can do it. Just remove distractions, spend a bit of time, do it kind of incrementally. Don't expect that you're going to be able to sit on your own in silence for a full day, but just a little bit, like every morning, just before you don't have your phone on. You wake up in the morning, leave your phone wherever it is, go and sit outside, uh, get some sun on your face, put some noise cancelling headphones in if it's too noisy where you are and there's no bird song or no natural noise. And if there's
mm,
natural noise, then sit out in that, but just do a little bit of that,
mm,
creating a little bit of space for you to then sort of settle into yourself, and keep it
yeah,
simple as well. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that we've done over the years in terms of changing our programs, is just introducing, and it sounds paradoxical, or that
mm,
you introducing more simplicity. So when I
mm,
first started the programs, they were full of
mm,
engagement activity, almost trying to force an outcome. Whereas now, remove everything, or as much as you can, to the point where it's just about to fall over, and then you know that you're done. So it's like the simple things,
yeah,
and just keeping it simple. You don't need to pursue or engage in complicated methodologies or means to
yeah.
begin that inquiry. It's just
Eh,
keep it simple.
Yeah, can I just quickly interject, just quickly? I think there's an incredible amount of confidence and lived experience and self self awareness to be able to hold that space and to have the confidence to know that you can be in that fluid state of just being and see where it goes. I think that in the modern world we live in, and a lot of these programs that are out there for self development and whatever, they are, in my opinion, there's not everyone, but there are a lot that are very sort of I don't know if generic's the right word, but you know, they're very formulated where it doesn't really have room for spontaneity, for things to go where they need to go. They're too rigid, in my opinion. So I love collaborating and working with people who work like I do, because I work in that really fluid, spontaneous, trust the process. Let's just land and see what comes out of that. And that's quite a an art form to be able to curate that space, in my opinion.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah, being comfortable, again, I've used the phrase a few times, and I think it's one from the military, comfortable with the uncomfortable. So just sort of sit with that,
Yeah.
um, and that's the environment, also within oneself, but the uncertainty around that, not having to control everything, because if it's too rigid, you're
Mm.
forcing things along. Everybody goes at a different pace. Everyone's measure of success is different.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's experience is different. You know, what they want as an outcome is different. So why should you have
Yeah.
a set program that, excuse me, a set program that then this notion that it will cater to all requirements? It doesn't. You know,
Mm,
everybody's very different, which is why we do create things specifically for an
mm,
individual, because everybody's different, with a team specific to them because everybody's different,
yeah.
and requires different things. So yeah, having that flexibility is key, and having a process that's flexible and allowing for it to happen, because stuff happens. You know, and
Yeah.
we don't tell, I mean, we don't tell people what they're doing, as I said earlier, and part of that also is to give us the flexibility. So
Mm.
A, they're not focused on what's coming next, because they're going, oh, I thought we are going to do this on Tuesday, or I can't wait till Wednesday when we're going to do such and such. So because they don't know, there's none of that. They're just focused on what they're doing, but also gives us the flexibility to change. And there'll be things that we do, and you know, it might be 10 weeks, 10 days or 2 weeks somewhere, and we've
Mm.
started doing something, see that that's not working, and then immediately switch to something else.
Yeah.
It might have been that we planned for that particular activity to last for 2 or 3 days, but actually it's just lasted for half a day, because we see that either we've done what we need to do within that,
Hmm.
or it's not really landing. So let's just bin that and go on to something else. And
Yeah.
that's the kind of, you know, having the confidence to do that,
Yeah.
and with that uncertainty. And similarly with oneself, there is no right or wrong. You know,
Mm.
there's no, you know, no one's going to give you an A star, or get a badge or anything like that for it. So there's no right or wrong answer. There's only the answer.
Yeah. 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 I love that. I feel like it's also the other end of the spectrum to that is what you described in your early life when you was 14, 15, you know, that coming of age where we need that sort of structure as well. It's not like throwaway structure. I feel like it's a balance where I feel like you need to integrate some sense of discipline and structure, some pillars,
Mm,
but then to be able to also be malleable and flexible within it, if that makes
yes.
sense.
Yeah. And I think that that's maybe perhaps not explaining it, but you know, within the programs, having that framework. So yeah, you
Mm,
do have a structure that's like
yeah.
a bounded, uh, but within that, it's entirely flexible. So there is a
Mm,
structure, and there are boundaries, and there are things that you know, for safety, or uh, you know, that you can or cannot do, and so that there has to be some structure, because otherwise, you know, anyone who says it's organic and emergent and gives me the shits, because you know it ends up being, you know, that's just brackets chaos.
yeah.
You know, there has to be some structure, but it not so rote.
Mm, yeah.
And that's my point about having to sort of rigid. You know, you do step A to step B to step C to step D. It's not like that, and people aren't like that. People are unpredictable. They're
Mm,
emotional. You know, it's what makes us humans.
yeah. Yeah.
And then your point about, yes, when younger, having some sort of boundary that you then chafe up against, that then uh, you know, there are lessons that you learn around having that structure, having those boundaries of acceptable behavior or required behavior or required outcome. There needs to be some sort of there are some sort of benchmarks that allow
Mm,
for you to then yeah, progress.
yeah. It's just I think having an all-seeing eye for the work you do, you've got to have a certain level of ability to be able to pull it off to make this work, you know. And you've been doing it for years. I honestly, my time, little time, because it's you know it's not like we've worked loads together, but for my time that we've worked together, honestly, I get the most from working with you guys. It really, I learn all the time when I'm with you guys. You offer so much, and I've only just got a snippet of what's going on. You know, I've always felt really safe and held in the space that you create. It's really
No,
great
well,
what you
thank
do.
you.
Honestly,
Yeah,
it's really
no,
great.
thank you. I mean, for us, it's a privilege and a pleasure, and obviously, you know, we're doing it in service of the client, in service of the
Yeah,
individual we're working with, and affecting the best outcome for them. That's the driver
yeah,
for us. So yeah, you know, heartening to hear that those who are also participating in it, as in terms of delivering, as well as those that
yeah.
are engaged. Uh,
Always.
and you never have all of the answers, and you're never at a point where you've nailed it. You know, you're always working, you're always trying to improve and find a new way or a different way. And yeah, who was it? He said that if you ever figure out what it is that you do that makes the difference, that makes you special, you're fucked, because then you focus on that at the expense of everything else that supports that particular thing being
Yeah,
special.
yeah,
And so I think that there's an element of that. You're never quite, no one's ever the finished article, and you've never kind of
yeah,
reached the pinnacle. You're always just kind of growing. And but yeah, we learn too. And there are things that we do, and there's new stuff that we come across or try or engage in all the time. And I think that's the thing. It's about that curiosity that you mentioned earlier.
yeah, yeah. What came up for me just now, and I know we've joked about this before, is the when we had that young maverick, we'll just call him a young maverick on the boat, and we had to get from the shore to the other boat on the rip.
Yes, yeah, that's
That
right.
that's an example.
Yes.
That's an example that pops into my mind of when things go, you have to be resourceful and figure stuff out as it happens, you know. And
Yes.
I felt held by that what happened because I'm being where I live. I've been caught in riptides
Mm,
quite a lot, and I've been put off from surfing because of it. My
mm,
confidence. I think this is another thing I need to face.
mm,
And I don't think I admitted it to you. I don't think I've ever admitted this to you that I've got quite a fear of
mm.
riptides, and that was a pretty savage riptide going across on that shoreline.
Yes. Yeah, the tide. Well, yeah, it was a tide that was moving really quickly, and with waves and wind over tide. So yeah, we had to iterate in the moment, and make sure that everyone got safely to the vessel
Which
moored
we did.
offshore, which we
Which we
did.
did.
Yes,
We
but
got
yeah,
there.
no, it's same. Yeah, same for me too. But and I think unless you're practicing that, it fades. You have to practice those kind of decision making. You don't just do it once and then that's you sorted. You're always going to make good decisions around in those sorts of situations. You have to practice it because
Yeah.
there is skills fade. There is fade of dynamic decision making, dynamic risk assessment, um, and committing and going. Things that are like in that case, the first thing we tried not working, rather than keeping going with that, just stepping back and going, right, okay, well, what else are we going to do? Let's move the boat over the headland and come around this particular side,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, and rather than just, but that, and it was late at night and after a long day, so so you have to practice those things, and I think that's the point too.
Yeah.
You don't just knowing what you now know. What difference does that make?
Yeah.
How do you keep practicing this? How do you keep
Yeah.
moving on that? Because it's not just, oh, I know that, then that's sorted. I can put that in a box and fold it away,
Yeah.
and put it away. You've got to keep going.
And I think that's a metaphor for life because it's quite symbolic, the fact that we're talking about tide and
Mm-hmm.
water flowing, free flowing water and tide. We're working with the elements. You are working within the framework of the elements mainly.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it's like, you're working within the land, water, tide, everything's moving around. It's a very alive environment. And that's life. And I feel like it's symbolic what we're talking about. That
yeah,
it's learning to adapt to life, literally.
yeah. I mean, life's dynamic. Life's not static. This notion, excuse, excuse me. This notion that it is false. Life's dynamic.
Mm,
Things happen. Nothing's ever static. There is a degree of inherent unpredictability in everything.
hmm.
Um, and again, being comfortable with that, aware of that, confident to be able to deal with that, uh, and for yourself to be able to iterate. And these are phrases that I've used a lot and we use a lot.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's this sort of dynamism that's inherent in life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So for you, Callum, as an in
Excuse
as an
me, London.
individual, that's all right, mate. That's all right. As an individual, and EAC Extraordinary Adventure Club, what is the future for it? Have you got plans? I know, am I permitted to say this that you're starting to um write a book?
Yes,
Am
yeah.
I okay saying that? Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Excuse me. Just yeah, recovering from a cold. So
Yeah, I think I've
just
got
give me a
this.
minute.
I think we're miles away from each other, but I think I've got the same variant of the same cold.
Yeah, I reckon we have. Yes, no, I am writing. As I say, stories are a significant part of our of our lives. For me,
Mm,
success is stories, and having a plethora of and a rich seam of stories, and being an 85-year-old sitting on a porch in my rocking chair thinking that was amazing.
yeah.
All those experiences were hugely fulfilling, and the people that we met or worked alongside and supported. So for me, stories are a measure of success, and we see ourselves in other stories. We dream stories when we sleep.
Hmm.
Um, we have an internal narrative that's often guiding us as a compass bearing, and how do we create a new internal narrative or challenge the old one and
Hmm.
create a new narrative arc? So yeah, for me, stories are only of any value if shared, and so it's about sharing them. And so yes, I am writing, and have been for many years, in terms of capturing
Mm,
stories and thoughts and insights. And so yeah, currently writing essentially a sort of collage of all of those things,
mm,
of insights from the work that we've done, or the experiences that I or others have had, in terms of, yeah, this insight, methods, and experiences that will support others who might not necessarily be able to come on one of our programs, and so be able to share that with them, and some of the background that has led to the structure of the engagements that we have, and
mm,
yeah, some of those outcomes. And life in fact is stranger than fiction always.
mm,
um,
totally. I think that'd be a great it'll be a great resource, it'd be a great guide, a map even for people
mm-hmm.
to I can't wait to get my hands on it. So how far away from finishing? Are
Well,
you like
I set myself the target of, I mean, I've sketched out a number of chapters. I've sketched out sort of 15 chapters. I've
hmm
written, as I say, stuff in the past, but I want to have the first proper cut done by the beginning of the summer. So I'm not that
excellent.
far away.
Excellent. I'm definitely going to champion it when I get my hands on it, mate.
Thank you.
And then what else for you for the future? What's happening with EAC, with Extraordinary?
Um, yeah, we're still doing the work that we enjoy, this kind of long-term engagements with individuals,
Mhm,
and most of our engagements are long-term and years.
mhm,
Um, so having a small group of individuals that we work with, the odd family engagement as part of that work with individuals, as I say, with the sort of large enterprise families, businesses, and those in the creative arts, and some of the sort of emerging, those within the political space, and not just in this country, but in fact, not in this country, but elsewhere. So those kind of areas, that's really exciting for me, is to have this sort of long-term engagement, long-term impact, and then the writing and speaking about what we do,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
and uh, and then advisory. So been asked to sit on as a trustee on a number of organizations. So
It's great.
that's then playing out through this year. So changing from being in a delivery,
Hmm.
uh, going abroad, and which I love, don't and
Hmm.
I'll still do that, absolutely, um, but not spending so much time away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Sounds great, mate. Well, I feel like we've covered a lot. Is there anything else you feel we need to cover?
No, I mean, I think it's been, as always, a hugely enjoyable and engaging conversation. I mean, I'm
Yeah,
sure I'll think of things when I come off here that, to cover, and there's always more to talk about.
always. Well, look,
There's always more to
Callum,
talk about.
we'll always revisit this. Like I always say to people that I have on, we can always revisit this. I'm not going anywhere, and I think once your book's out, it would make sense to want to read it and then get you back on, talk about
Perfect.
some of the things in there. But for now, I feel like we've covered it. But yeah, I just want to say once again, thank you so much for joining me, and it's always highly enjoyable to be in your company. I think you're a really inspirational human being doing great work, and long may that continue, mate.
Well, thanks very much. Thank you, Dave, and always a pleasure talking to you. And yeah, love your approach, and what you bring, and what you bring to the work that we do too. And we're working together. And I love getting you up here and sticking you in some cold water or putting you on a mountainside.
Oh my God,
So regardless of what else is going on,
that cold water immersion. Oh my God. I mean, look, I'm not averse to getting some cold water, but that was, I think it was February in the
yeah.
Highlands.
No,
Oh,
that time it was September, I
was it
think, when you
September?
came. That first
Oh,
time you came up. Yeah, no, the other times
oh,
you've been up. Yeah, no, it
yeah,
has been
yeah, yeah.
February. You're right. Yes,
Yeah,
that was particularly cold.
that was Baltic.
Yeah,
That was proper
it
icicles, mate.
was. Yes, yeah.
Fun all the same. Okay, well, until we speak again, I bid you farewell, mate. And
Thank you. Have a
yeah,
great week.
and you, mate. Take care.
Thanks. Bye bye.